People have to be heard. Hey, I am Chuck the bureaucrat, and there's something that everybody loves to do. They love to talk. And now, this urge to talk is so powerful that you can hardly begin to suppress it. I do this one negotiating exercise where people have to go about 30 seconds without talking to their partner. And when you get a room full of about 150 people, it is not as simple as saying, hey, you guys can't talk. You gotta tell them that they won't be able to talk. You gotta explain why. And you gotta warn them when it's time to stop talking. And even then, you're gonna have people who can't help themselves. This need to talk is so strong. And once you realize that, you can start to leverage it to your own benefit instead of fighting it. I had this friend who used to work for a consulting company, and they had a rule. They said, the person who talks the most during a meeting is the person who thinks the meeting has been most successful. In fact, what they would do is they would list the names of the people in the meeting, and they'd make little tick marks beside each name when someone talked. Now, partly this was to make sure that the customer did most of the talking, but you can expand on it in a couple of interesting ways. If you're backseating a meeting, tally up who talks and how much, and it can give you an amazing insight into the relative power of the people at the table. That can be really informative at one of those weekly meetings where principals sometimes have to send their deputies because they're busy with something else. You do this over time, and you can start to notice if it's the personality or the office that people are giving deference to. If they're deferring to a personality, then you know that when that person gets reassigned, all the relationships will reshuffle. Another way this can come in handy is when you're running a meeting. What you do is you keep track of who hasn't talked, and then you create opportunities for those people to provide input. Suppose there's some assertive military person who says something that's kind of provocative in the middle of your meeting. If you're running the meeting, you don't necessarily want to engage directly with him because you'll get dragged into debate. So what you can do is you can turn to one of these people who haven't said anything, and you can ask them for their view on the comment. This can have a couple of interesting effects. First of all, that person that you've brought into the discussion is likely to make their comments directly towards you at the head of the table, and they'll avoid direct conflict with the person who made the original statements. Second, since you've managed to keep the meeting from turning into a conflict and you've invited input from other people, this encourages other folks to provide contributions. And finally, it avoids something really weird that tends to happen at the end of meetings where people don't get a chance to talk. Listen, if you prevent people from talking for an hour and a half, the very first chance they get, they will talk. And then what you get is that after meeting where people are discussing issues and points of view that should have been part of the formal meeting itself. There are going to be situations where there's just not time for everybody to make a comment in the formal meeting. And in those situations, what you need to do is pay attention to the person who said nothing, especially if their body language suggested that they really had something to say. As soon as the meeting breaks up, you or somebody on your team needs to buttonhole that guy and find out what he thinks. Because I'll guarantee you this, it's almost certainly not that the meeting is headed in the right direction. And usually what they're about to do is go back and mobilize their leadership to try to subvert whatever course of action that meeting was proposing. Bottom line, people like to talk. They like to be included in the discussion. And when they don't get an opportunity to talk, it's not a good sign. And now that you understand this, take a look at this video to see why grumpy old men behave the way they do.